She explained that in our 420-page Canadian history textbook, she could find only 63 words about an era that had apparently lasted for decades and was Canada-wide in its implication. She had already done some reading on her own and was shocked and appalled by what she was unearthing. For Andrea, the most hard-hitting fact was something called the annual death rate, a key metric in the reports made by residential school inspector Dr. Peter Bryce at the height of the assimilative era. She had never heard of schools with death rates before. How many of our students have? Yet the percentage of children who were shipped off to school and never came home were mind-boggling. 67% in one school where records were meticulously kept. More appalling still was the fact that the numbers of children dying were not of any real concern to the department that oversaw the schools. Andrea's entirely appropriate, heartfelt response to what she was learning led her to involve me, her peers, and eventually the entire school in her project. We knew that what we were learning needed to go beyond the books. The stories Andrea was hearing and reading about were of children much younger than she, who had been taken from their homes and communities to be turned into someone else's idea of a proper European child. She felt stories like these needed a new kind of learning, one that made room for the heart and spirit, and so would permit students to connect in an appropriate way with the gravity of what they were learning, and then to act on that knowledge in a tangible way. Of utmost importance was that this learning be done in a way which centered the Indigenous experience. Being at the other end of history and viewing it from that perspective was the most important part of this project. We ended up by creating a learning module that would be a commemoration to the children that died as a result of the IRS system. We knew the Canadian government was preparing its historic apology to residential school survivors. So, as mainstream learners, most of us, we thought we needed to prove to Aboriginal people that we are serious about learning this material, and we need to take the next step. We need to accept responsibility for the actions of our people. So, the teaching module became one that incorporated gestures of reconciliation. To show that we are sorry, we would put our words into action. This module would have 5 parts to it, each part extremely important in the development of the narrative. Part 1 would be the learning about the Indian residential schools themselves, the facts and figures as best as we could find them. This is where the students read the reports of Dr. Bryce, the federal health inspector, and it's also where they found out that the schools were experiencing annual death rates from 24% to 75%, where even a model school had a death rate of 49%. Part 2 would entail the students having their school paired with an historic Indian residential school. As part of the pairing, they would learn about the contributions to Canadian society made by the Indigenous people on whose land that Indian residential school stood or stands. Part 3 would see the students pouring their thoughts and feelings into an artistic endeavor, that of decorating wooden tiles, each tile symbolically representing the life of an Aboriginal child. The learners would be remembering these children and why they died. This becomes the first gesture of reconciliation. And if there are any of you who are interested, we have a teacher, a past recipient of the Governor-General's Award for Teaching Excellence in History with us right now. Her name is Nancy Hamer-Strahl. And these are some of the tiles one of her students did at a school in Port Perry. So when you're finished, if you want to come and take a look, please feel free. Part 4 centers on the expert knowledge of the Aboriginal elder, an Indian residential school survivor, or a cultural worker. Students are brought into the storytelling, the rich mine of remembering and bearing witness that so grips a young learner and that yet is usually left out of textbook history. Students listen as a smudging ceremony to cleanse the tile is done, or as a teaching is given. Part 5 becomes the second gesture of reconciliation. Students learn about a current issue that confronts Indigenous people, and they walk the talk of truth and reconciliation by putting their learning into action, an action that addresses that issue, whether by letter writing, petition signing, or public manifestations of unity with Indigenous causes, which are our causes too, because, as the elders remind us, we are all treaty people and we are all our relations. These 5 parts encompass the whole of Project of Heart. Within the Anishinaabe worldview, the learner is centered. Through the experiential nature of the project and the importance of relationships in meaning-making, Project of Heart has helped elucidate the students' responsibilities for acting to make Canada a place where all of us can say, now we know, and now we can make it better.